All right. Hello, everybody. So today I need to admit to being like a like an imbecile who doesn't pay attention to things because it's really funny. But there was that game that came out. Man, I think the game actually came out in April. It was Eiyuden 100 Heroes. It's made by some of the people that kind of worked on the old Suikoden games, and it was kind of like a throwback to that. And I backed that on Kickstarter back in the day, and like I only do Kickstarters very rarely, and like they usually will be like, hey, alert, you need to do a thing in order to get your copy of the thing that you kickstarted when it if and when it actually gets completed. And for some reason I either missed the email from them, or like I just didn't get one, or they didn't like put a subject line in there. It was like, hey, you still need to do this. And so like when it came out, I'm like, well, it's probably going to take them a little while to fill all those orders. And I was like one of the well, I backed it right at the end. I'm not like a huge backer, so they have no real obligation to me to be particularly quick. And I'm like, I've waited for it for a year or more, so what the heck, it's not going to be that big of a deal. And so I kind of waited, and then I kind of forgot about it, and like I never received my copy. I'm like, I must have, and I was like, oh, I'll deal with it at some point, but I just kept forgetting. And so this was literally a month ago, September 19th. I finally went back onto their website and was like, why didn't I get my thing? And it turns out that I needed to pay them $6 for shipping, which I didn't think of. So like, I'm like, oh, here's my credit card, here's $6. Can you please ship me a copy for PS4 like I paid for? And it probably went to an email address that just never gets checked anymore, because they're like, yeah, we finished that 6 months ago. Where have you been? And so, like, finally, they shipped it a couple of days ago. And I'm not faulting them for this. Like, this is one of those things where like your fulfillment has been completed. Everybody who's going to contact you probably has contacted you. You're probably working on something else at this point. And so when, this random email comes to your mailbox, or your random message comes to your mailbox, it's like, fulfillment for what? Right? We don't even have any of those on hand anymore. Like, we sold them all. Like, they're gone. I'm going to have to go to friggin' Best Buy and pick up a copy of this from PS4 and ship it to you. Something like that is probably what ended up happening. And so it took them a couple of weeks to figure out that I even had, like, paid them shipping. But they finally shipped it, and it finally arrived yesterday. And I played it for about an hour last night, and okay, I'm not far in enough yet to know whether the translation is really bad. But what I will say is this: the English translation adds a lot of material compared to the Japanese version. I probably should have had like actual examples to give you guys, but there have been a couple of times so far in the game where like because I'm using the Japanese voice acting and the English text. And so there's been, in the first hour of the game, there's already been like 3 or 4 cases where the Japanese is like, yeah, that sounds good. And the English is like, blink my blimies, blimers. That sure seems like a great idea to me. I can't believe you thought it was such a wonderful thing. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it is a little bit overdone. The English text has a lot more material than the Japanese voice acting does, or assumedly, therefore, the Japanese text. And so this is one of those things that is touchy, because people often don't want. Well, so here's so a little history lesson. Back in the day, games would be made in Japan, and then they would be shipped to an American company or a British company or whatever, and someone would do the translation, and then they would do all the translation work, and they would put out the English version of the game. And the problem is, number one, that if the game had multiple translators, sometimes they wouldn't talk to each other that well, or sometimes they would have like communication failures where like someone would translate a town's name as X and somebody else would translate the town's name as Y, right? And the other thing that they couldn't do is they couldn't like check in with the writers in Japan and be like, hey, what are your impressions of this character? What do we need to know when translating this about this character's personality that you want us to bring out if we have to meddle with anything? And sometimes these things were done very piecemeal, where they would just be like, here's a block of text, please translate the text, and there would be context lacking. And so in those cases, it was really important to not, it was really important to not like add things, because what could often happen would be that you like add cheery dialogue to a character who's, generally, fairly subdued or even, like depressed, like a depressed sounding character. And because you got this one block of text in isolation and you translated it with a happy tone, it jars. It sticks out as like, oh, this was what the heck happened here? Like this character is like down, 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 up, down, 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 down. And so back then, for sure, it was very troubling if translators added things or played around with translations a lot. If they did, they ended up, they ran the risk of making something that was very inconsistent, something that was, specifically against the intentions of the Japanese writer. Nowadays, things are a little bit better. There's a little bit more communication back and forth, and I think that was especially true with the Eiyuden team, because they kind of were working on the English and the Japanese version simultaneously. And I think that there was some back and forth between, the original writers and the translators and such and such and such. And so, if you're a really good writer, you can get away with this sometimes. You can say, okay, here's character Bob, and Bob is a cheerful, sarcastic guy. And so, in translating the Japanese, you can at least justify saying, well, if this is Bob's character, we're going to add a little bit more sarcasm to the English version than maybe there is in the Japanese version. Because, we've got this consistent view of this character. When you're translating something piecemeal, when you're part of a team translating things, this is really dangerous because, translator A can say Bob is sarcastic and translator B can say Bob is, a jokester. And you end up with very confusing and mixed up translations. So I'm not going to necessarily say that it's bad. This is definitely a matter of taste, but I am definitely seeing that the Japanese is a lot more terse than the English. There's a lot more oh, haha, here's this little character detail in the English version compared to the Japanese. And I don't know. It's one of those things I definitely have mixed feelings about. Some people really hate it. Some people really like it. Some people, accept it. I'm not sure that anybody really likes it. But I don't know. If you have found any good examples of games, videos, TV shows, movies, where the English translation added a lot to the Japanese version and it came out good, let me know. Because I'd be curious to know what people's opinions are. I can think of... So there was an anime called Full Metal Panic, and there was a pseudo second season of it called Fumofu, which was a straight comedy. It's not. It threw away all the serious stuff that was in the original show and just made a comedy for 12 or 13 episodes. And it's one of the rare shows where I find the English dub more interesting than the Japanese dub, because the English dub had Chris Patton as the main character, Sagara, and Chris Patton's deadpan is way better than the Japanese actor's deadpan. And I don't know if that was intentional, but the comedic value of that straight deadpan is so high in that comedy show, and it works so well in the English version that I definitely prefer the English version of the Japanese version. That's rare, because usually Japanese voice actors are a little bit more nuanced and take their roles more seriously, to be honest. It's one of those things that, if it's done right, you can do it, but it's hard to do right. And that's the same thing is true of adding to your translation when you're going from Japanese to English. If you start adding a bunch of stuff, you run the risk of either A, oversaturating, or B, ending up with something that's inconsistent with the whole story that's already been written, right? It's like if I'm translating a book sequentially, right? I start at page 1 and I'm adding all this stuff to the translation. The translation is like, oh yeah, he went to the store and he bought a pack of chips. And I'm like, he walked to the store and he ruffled through all the rifled through all the different packs of chips, and this made him angry because he really liked honey mustard. And then somewhere later in the book there's a thing about how much he hates honey mustard. It's a ridiculous example, but you kind of get where I'm going with this. Since I'm translating this work from start to finish, unless I am already have read it all the way through several times, I can very easily, in the act of inserting something to make it more colorful, I can end up putting something in that contradicts something that happens later in the work. And a lot of translators don't get a lot of time. I don't want to belittle what they're doing, in the sense that sometimes they don't get a lot of extra time to really go over and really understand the work before they have to start translating it. Some of these projects might say, "Yep, you got 3 days, go for it." And it's like, well, I can do it in 3 days, but I'm going to have to get in and all the way through without stopping. And so, yeah, it's one of those things where time's going to tell. So far, I've enjoyed the game. It had the first dungeon had a neat little puzzle that I didn't catch that it was something that I was supposed to solve now for a little bit, and I was like, what am I supposed to do here? And so that was fun. Feeling oh, the game's not hand-holding me through this and providing me with an arrow of go here. It's like, no, the map goes out. There's no map for this area, and you got to figure out how to solve this problem. And so that was kind of fun. I enjoyed that. And I won't say that the English translation is bad necessarily. They're adding things that seem to be in character for the time being. And that might be because they were working together rather closely with the Japanese writers at the time to kind of make things mesh up. But I am saying that there's definitely a lot of stuff added in the English version. Like I said, I've played the game for an hour. 40 minutes of that hour was played in a dungeon. And I've already noticed 3 or 4 spoken lines where it's yeah, they clearly added something to the English version compared to the Japanese. It's kind of okay, so I'm going to put this in, but I had a funny idea for a little short skit to do that, so I'll show that here. なあ、卵はスクランブルでいいかい？いいよ。And that's kind of what it is sometimes. The English localizer or translator decides to add a bunch of stuff, and that can make things funnier, or it can make things more interesting, or it can give characters more color. But it's something that people have to be really careful about, and it has to be done with it takes extra time to do it well. If it's been done in the same kind of speedy way that most commercial translations are done, I would say it's probably a bad idea. As for Eiyuden's translation, time will tell. I'm going to continue playing through it with the English text and the Japanese voices, and if I find anything really egregious, I'll note it down and mention it in one of these videos. But yeah, it's kind of I kind of wanted this to be a short and a funny one, because it's just me being stupid, in the sense that game comes out in April. Oh, they never shipped it to me. Oh, whatever. Finally, late September. Why didn't they ever ship that to me? I'm glad that they finally did ship it out to me, because I did want to play it, but it's just so funny how I completely screwed up the fulfillment process. I gotta be careful, because I kickstarted that. I was part of the Kickstarter for that. There was 2 games that were kickstarted together, the new Wild Arms style game and the new Shadowheart style game. I forget what they're called, actually, but those are supposed to come out soon, I think. And I gotta make sure I actually get those shipped out when that happens. And I don't wait 6 months like an idiot. Oh God! All right. Yeah, that's all I've got for today. I don't know. I tried to make that skit. I've never done like skits before. It's harder than you think because I have to like set up the camera and like have props and stuff. I don't know. If that was funny, let me know in the comments or whatever. I don't know. If you're still here, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you want to support the channel, you know what to do. Aside from that, I'll say have a good day and I'll see you tomorrow.